أهلا وسهلا بكم مرة أخرى في بودكاست حمزون. In this podcast, we'll speak in English about many important things in life. For now, I have nothing to say, but in a while, there will be many. This is how to start writing, and this is how to start speaking. It is also how to start listening. As you listen, you come up with many ideas about the things the speaker is talking about. At the same time, you came up with many ideas about your things in life. You came up with ideas about your last lunch, ideas about your last methods, ideas that will make you better in every aspect. There are a field that the podcasters in this time are interested in. That is to be how to speak as usual as you can, and the listener will speed up your speaking, making it easier to understand and faster. I don't know if you do it or not. This is not what is the podcast about. And this field that I have talked about with the podcasters and what they are streaming is talking about unimportant things. They sit in front of a camera, and start saying whatever comes into their mind. In a while, their idea will develop, and they will construct some kind of a subject. It is also can be called improvisation. Improvisation is something that is very nice to do, and it is very underrated in this time frame. Improvisation can be utilized in drawing, but of course, improvisation alone will get you only so far. Therefore, there must be previous exercises on speaking, listening, thinking, and drawing. Same goes for any profession. For my case, in example, I am a dentist. Therefore, I have to be very careful and meticulous when it comes to applying a rubber dam, for example, or extracting a tooth. I do it with improvisation, but that doesn't mean that I do it with improvisation alone. As I have gathered from my long experience in life in the field of dentistry, a lot of cases, theoretical and practical, handling extraction and application of the rubber dam. Today, for example, I have tried the rubber dam on myself. The subject was that people can use improvisation in their lives to improve things. And with that we are already talked about, doing a podcast needs improvisation, as you know. Sometimes no one hears it, as it could be primitive, but in a while it can get better and better. This is the podcast. Podcasts better be done at night, in quiet, and when somebody is sleeping, because this would require him or her a little of effort, except for moving his tongues. The speaker will get experience and the listener will get relaxation and a peace of mind. Because the listener, especially for this podcast, would know in advance that such podcast would help him sleeping, that such podcast is not a type of podcast that is adversary, adversary, not the type of podcast that is reluctant, or a type of podcast that is usually angry. I wish many people hear this podcast and understand it as well. In many cases, this podcast can be cringy, and in many other cases, this podcast can be boring and unimportant. But in many others, this podcast can be very fulfilling and a learning experience. Therefore, we have to define and make a subject for this podcast. To make a subject is to have something to say, to have an idea. And this idea, as much as possible, if it is controversial, therefore there will be many people hearing it. And as much as possible, if it is learning and a source of knowledge, there will be equal amount people are more interested and willing to hear it. I advise people, those that brushing their teeth, washing dishes, doing a boring activity, to hear a podcast, as this will make their tedious job much more entertaining. And to hear something does not have to be the most advanced, the most important and necessary subject in their life. The opposite is right. It can be a silly podcast, just this one, like this one. It can be just a silly podcast that would make them feel happy. Something to spend time with and to spend time on. Something that they can hear, a voice, something they can relate to and experience. Does not have to be profound, does not have to be philosophical, and it does not even have to be entertaining. It can only be a podcast about someone talking about something in life. And this someone is me, and this something is this subject that I'm going to talk about. And I'm happy that you are hearing me, and I'm happy that you are listening to me, and I am talking to you. It is nice to speak and to hear anything. Some people are very interested in life, therefore, they try to do their best in their jobs to gain as much money as possible, to buy the newest cars and TVs, to have the best buds, and to brag about everything they do. And that's nice. But some others, like me, don't care about any of that. Success is nice, but it has not to cost a lot of efforts, nor it does have to cost a lot of thinking, except when it is necessary. Therefore, I'm making this podcast, stating that it's not important to have something very important, and it does not necessary to have something necessary. You just open the mic and start talking. Some other podcast people like to talk about economy, philosophy, politics, science, education, and medicine. But at this one, there are nothing about any of that. Maybe there will, but for the time being, it's only talking about a really vague and a really intuitive kind of living. We are not here to say that this podcast is important, that you have to hear in order for you to improve. We're not here to say that this podcast is some kind of a treasure that you have found. It's merely a coincidence that you have stepped on such one and you're sprang finding a good podcast to listen to while doing your things. And finding such podcast is really an advantage for everyone, including me. Because the internet is filled with redundant and filled with an abundance of intellectual and professional podcasts. How to change your life, how to live better, how to eat healthier, how to maintain relationships, and how to make new ones. How to become the best you can, how to hit harder and go to the gym, how to wake up early and manage your time, how to treat others, and how can you expect them to treat you. And this one is not any of that. It's actually just me talking about stuff. And therefore it is better, in my opinion. You don't have to apply any of your brain cells trying to understand what an answer is about. You can also think about something else as I'm talking. You don't even have to pause it. You don't even have to think profoundly about what I'm talking about. But still, there might be some instances that would make this podcast much more profound and deeper meaning and value containing. We will always come into this podcast talking about things in life, and they will be there very general and very vague. And for someone to step upon such one would need a lot of luck and dedication. I remember as my thoughts comes to my mind like a breeze of air. I remember as thoughts comes and lunge from my mouth into the air like a breeze of wind. I remember as I'm speaking, I think and I remember old stories. And I remember once I was walking and I saw in the distance some kind of colosseum, a building circular with many steps and windows. A building so old that graffiti has been written on its walls. People have invited me there and they said, come and take an exam. It was a math exam and it was not easy at all. This story is very long and it is not really related to our podcast subject in the first place. And the subject of this podcast will be written after I finish it. The subject could be anything. The subject can be about me watching in the building a colosseum from a distance. It is interesting, by the way, how we are here speaking English and the English people don't speak any other languages. And it is also very understandable and very interesting. I wish that in this life that is very short and uneventful, there will be some kind of general consensus and understanding between people. They can manage not to destroy the world, but instead agree that they should not use extensive power in managing their deals. It is not that simple to tell the entire world that to get rid of the nuclear weapons, for example. But still, it is nice to say that. It is, after all, a very short life, and it is, after all, a ticking bomb in everyone and each one listening and speaking in these podcasts, and even those who don't. A ticking bomb in each person in his body or her body. A ticking bomb that can explode at any minute or any hour, any year. A ticking bomb that people try to avoid and forget. But the time would come for me and the stone on the ground would be the same. Therefore, don't be so surprised if I become the king of the kings, or leader, or a professional, or a captain of the team, or a builder, or a soul, or an elephant rider, or a writer, or a famous actor, or a stone on the wall, or on the ground. It can also it can all be easily possible in this life and in this world. I can be here, spend my life every second and until the last minute staying in this piece of ground in Najaf city. Or I can be flying to the north or to the south pole of the world. No one really knows. I can be the best or the worst. With luck, everything is possible. We will see what's going to happen, but probably it would be the end and the beginning at the same time without many changes or any developments. Still, to crave development is not bad, and to work for it, to make educational content understandable for a large, a large group of targeted audience is really not a bad thing to do. To end the day with a nice doing, to do some chores at home or outside. You can clean the floor and you can take a walk, for example. You can go under the sun and you can read a book. You can develop your mental capacity with your specific field of study and practice. Even an hour in a day is enough. And of course, the plane has to interrupt our podcast. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. And yeah, that's what's going on through my mind at this point. I don't like being confrontational, or I don't like being negative about stuff. Although I can be, because people usually don't like to hear negative stuff, as it only affects me in my specific case. But instead, they like to hear good stuff, even if I was dying in hell, as they want to get something out of this podcast without feeling angry, hungry, or itchy. And that's why this podcast is so successful, and that's why this podcast is so popular. And as long as I'm talking about this podcast as being so popular and so interesting and so successful, it will be eventually. It's a matter of time until it becomes one of the most viewed and heard podcasts in this world. And the things that is going for this podcast is its simplicity. There are many podcasts in this world that are competing with me, but none of them is as simple and as forward going like this one. Maybe I am the most narcissistic and obnoxious one of them, and maybe I am the least. Therefore, people will judge if they want to continue hearing such thing or not. After all, it's a podcast. After all, it's like drawing. It's like a running. Do you like these guys running? Do you like these guys painting? And do you like these guys singing? Same as for this podcast. If you like these guys talking or not, it's a matter of preference. And in life, people likes to cook. They like to make something new to eat or to share it with the family and friends. Same goes with me, but instead of family or friends, I like to share my contents with a wide variety of audience. And I'm not relying on them at the moment, but I like to do it regardless. It is nice to walk in the streets of Baghdad city or Najaf city. It's even nicer to walk in some streets here and there in this world. You see people that are busy. You see people that are annoyed. These people that are annoying, especially in this day of an age. At this day and age, it's like living in the Middle Ages in Europe. It's like Britain in the 1800s, or worse, actually. You walk here in the street of a Middle Eastern country, it's like walking in a jungle. Except that jungle have much nicer sceneries and much more interesting views. You walk in such streets in this city, you see a dead dog around the corner. And I've seen this dog for about 2 months now, and no one is taking it to the recycle being of biological beings, if there is such thing. I see a dead cat that's being removed for some reason, but the dog has not been removed. The dead body will get bloated and inflated. Ultimately, it will be gone. You walk up this street, and if you wear glasses and hat, someone would say bad things about you. It's not particularly pertaining to this city alone, but it can be seen in any other city in the world. I don't like to focus on bad things in life or negative things at all, but this is something to keep in mind. I like to spend my days staying in my room doing some exercises and improving my dental skills. My next project is to make a seminar that's a presentation about stainless steel crowns in children. And it's really unfortunate that this podcast has no one specific subject to stick to, but it can be an, an advantage from some point of view. It can be a strong point to have no subject to talk about. Because we go from subject to subject and we choose which one is better and we leave the worst one. But the worst subject has to come as it comes and occurs for the better subject to come. Therefore, all subjects are important and all subjects are nice. Even if I make a made up subject like a butterfly. And I like especially to talk about new things in life. I really don't like to talk about how, and just like how all other people are saying in this time and in this period of time. They will only talk about some well known facts. They will start saying that this is something bad, because people hate it. And this thing is good because people like it. And they will start put their advertisements and they will start do some plugins in the middle of the video. Fortunately for us, this has not been the case so far, but it might be in the future. Some people like to dogpile on others, to call them names, to do podcasts that hurt others' feelings, or to hurt others' physical and mental beings. But this one does not do that at all. This podcast is only talking about nice things and cool things in life. And if there is something really, really controversial and something that is really bad, there will not be a place for that thing to be mentioned in this podcast at all. I know in such manner and attitude the subjects and talking points in this podcast would be very limited. But this is the only way to advance and to talk. To talk to the public and to those who are willing to listen. And I know it can be frustrating for some of you to hear the same thing over and over again on this talking point. But really, in this day and age, it's hard to talk about something that is controversial or something that is interesting. Therefore, we'll continue finding and trying to find subjects that are easy to digest and easy to listen to and to maintain a good relationship with our listeners. We will try to find subjects to talk to you about, subjects that are not even important to me and not even important to you, subjects that you listen to for you to think about other things and for me to talk about, for me to improve my speaking and thinking skills. This subject now is about cars. There are some cars in this universe that like to make drifting. And drifting is annoying to the heart and mind. Therefore, if you see someone drifting, you'd have to drift with him with your voice. You'd have to talk bad stuff about him, and this would be a virtual machine or a virtual box to try your stuff in it. And this virtual machine can transfer to the real world because ultimately we're all are living in a virtual box. You would have to go to this guy, to this drifter, and start flailing and start being angry with him. The thing that goes into your mind as you are shouting and being angry is that why are we still doing this? In 2024, and after people have discovered almost everything, there are kids in the streets and young adults and adults who like to do drifting and like to shout and drift, which is not nice. In this virtual box, you'd almost be hurt and you'd almost be dead. But still, you have to do it. This virtual machine might not be available yet so far because the technology is not out there yet. But still, you'd have to think and do stuff at your own pace, being angry and mad. To follow these guys who are drifting and accost them with an accosting voice. I feel really sleepy after doing this podcast. After I have told you about many information about things in life that are more important than not saying anything at all, it's now for me a time to take a rest, but to do it with a slow voice. Uh, to speak with a slow voice means that you want to avoid talking loudly. The problem with this is that your voice might not be heard very clearly while you are speaking. I remember in my youth, I used to use a cow as a Yuri to control the brains of my enemy. And for those who do not understand what I'm talking about and what do you mean by Yuri and brain control, it was a game called Command and Conquer. It was one of the nicest games that I played in my youth. I wish that these simpler and calmer days comes back. I used to be living with my family as a kid and going to school without getting harassed and accosted by drifting cars. There might have been drifting cars around the streets of Najaf Suchi, but I might be so young and childlike. I used to be very annoying and I used to be very loud. So because of that maybe I did not care or hear them drifting their cars around the neighborhood. This is a tale of my childhood, so if you are willing to listen and understand how it has been the life, how it's been like the life, how the life has been like in Najaf city in the 1999. Therefore, please stick with us and listen so that you can understand. I don't know how the life is in the Philippines or in New York City for a child, but for me it was like an adventure. I used to be with my uncles and cousins here in the Kufa city, and we were playing and having fun all the time. Then the geopolitical stuff have changed and shifted. So our lives have been shifted with it, and my uncle has gone to another city in another country, and my other uncle has stayed. I am unfortunately or fortunately have stayed in Najaf city. The only thing I did was going from Najaf city, Kufa to Najaf city, Najaf city center. That's only the change that I have made. And it's really, 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 really hard to make any change in life, especially in this kind of an environment. It's really not easy for you to develop and to find a job in this time and in this city. And for this, I mean, this human that is me and his family. The family is a very typical one and they like doing jobs at different places. And me, I also like doing a job in a specific place. In the future, I might own my own business, a dental clinic, for example, or a coffee shop, for another example. But for that time being, I am having about $450 a month from my dental government job. I don't know if this will develop and I will be able to own something and get out of this environment to a better one or to stay here and try to change it for the best. Only time would tell. Many people like to travel and to get information from around the world, and many people like to stay or have no choice but to stay. And during this struggle, I have limited time in this life that I am willing to use every second of it in a productive manner. trying my best and not trying my above average or above best in order not to lose my mind or my muscle capacity or to be a sucker who is willing to throw his life under the bus for a goal that is hard to achieve. I'll take it step by step from here on, and I will do the things that are really necessary and important. If I succeed in the goal that I've made and built for myself, that means I would be traveling the world, walking at any place that I want to, and having a friend and a family that I am proud about. It does not mean that this place or this family and friends are not good at all. But what I'm talking about is to develop these friends and family for a better situation and this city for a better city that can have a better means, a better way to transport people from point A to point B. I don't know how long have we been talking about, but I guess that's enough for today. Thank you for tuning in, and every day we will talk to you about different subjects in life in this podcast. Hamzoon.